would be justice for you?
My result that I want is just a fair outcome and a fair sentence. Right now, I'm due to get sentenced next month, April 26th, and I'm due to receive a life sentence in prison.
26-year-old Javontae White.
Javontae White facing life in prison. White was the source of the fentanyl, although he was not the one who actually gave it to 33-year-old Elaine Christensen. White was found guilty in September. He was retried on the distribution causing death charge after jurors last year were unable to reach a verdict.
The first trial, it took the jury members 13 hours over a day and a half period to do the deliberation, and they ended up still saying that they could not agree, which led to a hung jury, which they call in the federal system mistrial. But my second trial, the jury members only deliberated for an hour, maybe an hour and a half at the most, and they found me guilty, which clearly shows that they didn't even take time to evaluate the whole situation or even fully look over the evidence that was given to them that they learned over a 3-4 day period of trial. It took 3-4 days of trial, and then you find me guilty within 1 hour and a half. Clearly, you're not looking over everything properly.
Right. And then why do you feel? I mean, why do you even think that they even move forward with trying you a second time? Typically, did your attorney say, is that typical that they would try again, or was that outside of the norm?
Yeah, they said it's definitely it's not a common thing, but they said it has been done, but it's not a common thing, and we just honestly feel like that their main focus and their main target is trying to satisfy the victim's family.
Because of those relationships and the history of the father, and some of that played out.
Political.
Yeah, some of that played out in the courtroom as well. You could just see that, those relationships were present.
It's because the victim's brother is an assistant Kent County prosecutor and her father a retired Grand Rapids judge.
There was an instant where we saw where a certain family member, which I won't say, was actively allowed to have his cell phone in the building. And clearly everyone else was advised that cell phones weren't allowed. So I think that favoritism was pretty visible. You could see it in a number of ways and how it played out in the courtroom. Hopefully we can share this with the community and help bring justice to your situation.
Yeah, that's definitely all I want, man. Like I said, I just want the fair outcome in my situation, and just to get a fair sentence. And I have no problem taking full responsibility for my action and receiving consequences that due to my actions. But what's happening right now, this is not fair to me in no type of way. And right now, incarcerated going on 3 years, which is more time than anybody else who's involved in the case.
3 people were involved in the drug delivery chain that led to Christensen's death.
White is scheduled to be sentenced in late April. He remains in federal custody. 2 others involved in the case were sentenced in state court.
One of the white males is alleged that I distributed drugs to him, and that white male distributed drugs to another white male who gave the drugs to a white woman, a white female that ended up overdosing and dying. It was 7 different drugs present in the victim's system when she died.
Left. Javontae, can you state your full name?
Javontae Quintez White.
Okay. And how old are you?
I'm 28 years old.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where you originally from? Kind of share with us a little bit kind of about your upbringing.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, southeast side of Grand Rapids. I was raised with, single mother and an older brother and couple younger siblings. I was always really, family oriented. So I made it through 11th grade in high school, but I ended up getting my GED. So
all right, cool.
Pretty much it.
Cool. No, thanks for sharing that, man. So I want to go ahead and kind of get into why we're here today. Want to talk about your situation, kind of tell your story. I think it would be best to kind of take a few steps back and just talk about as much as you feel comfortable with. Start sharing your story. Let's talk about the events that transpired up till today.
Well, it went back. It dates back to July 8th of 2018. I got incarcerated for selling some drugs. They charged me with allegedly distributing fentanyl, and they said that the fentanyl that I allegedly distributed to one person, he did distribute it to another person, who then gave it to his girlfriend that ended up dying. So they at least placed me 2 steps behind the person that died, and I never met the person that died, nor did I also know the person who gave it to the person that died. And from there I was in King County Jail for about 8 months, and then I was federally indicted on the charges of distribution of fentanyl resulting in death and lesser other drug charges.
And what year was this when this took place?
I was federally indicted March 5th of 2019, but this original case happened July 8th of 2018.
Okay. So you've been incarcerated. How long have you been incarcerated now?
As of right now, 32 months.
Okay.
Going on 3 years.
And what are you being charged with?
Well, I was charged with, like I said, distribution of fentanyl resulting in death, and a lesser charge of possession with intent to distribute fentanyl and cocaine, which I was found guilty in a federal trial on all charges.
Gotcha. During the second trial, we'll get to that. But I think it's important now to talk about kind of I guess I want to say the elephant in the room, or the smoking gun, as to where the major concern is, and why you feel like you were being racially discriminated against in this whole process. You want to talk a little bit about kind of the relationships and the intertwinings as it relates to some of your concerns in your case.
Circumstance of the situation is I am the only black male involved in the whole situation. There's 2 other white males. One of the white males is alleged that I distributed drugs to him, and that white male distributed drugs to another white male who gave the drugs to a white woman, a white female that ended up overdosing and dying. Also, the female that ended up passing away, her father is retired judge out of Grand Rapids, out of the Kent County 61st District downtown courthouse, and her brother is also assistant prosecutor, currently still working downtown Grand Rapids at the Kent County courthouse. So I feel like that definitely made my case high profile, and I feel like that's one of the main targets and reasons why I was federally prosecuted. Also, the 2 individuals, the 2 other white males involved in the situation, they were never federally prosecuted, or they were never actually charged with the death. And they are the 2 closest people to the death.
And both of those gentlemen are to your knowledge, still currently incarcerated, but serving a much lesser time and less serious offenses.
Well, actually, the boyfriend of the victim, which his name, I don't know if you want me to say his name, but his name is Ryan Hall. He was actually given 1 year in the county jail for just a delivery charge, just saying that he possessed and delivered the drugs to the victim. And he was actually only given 1 year in the county jail. And the other individual involved was given 3 years in state prison in Michigan MDOC. And he's coming up on about to be released here. It should be in July. But the first guy, he's been out since about May 2019.
Okay, gotcha. So I think that's a big piece of it. There is, the concern around the conflicts of interest with the family and the relationships there. I want to also talk about kind of shifting a little bit, not from you to the victim. There was also some concern in the case around the toxicology report. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. The original doctor that did the original autopsy report, his name is Stephen Cole, and he works at Spectrum Health Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He originally said from the beginning that the cause of death was a mixed drug intoxication, and he said that the cause of death was due to numerous different drugs. And he also signed that on the death certificate of the victim that the cause of death was a combination of numerous different drugs. But when I ended up getting federally indicted and I went to trial, the doctor, he came to my trial to testify on behalf of the prosecution, the government, and he kind of totally switched his story around and said that he felt that the main only cause of death was fentanyl, but that was never what he said in any of his original reports of the autopsy report or the death certificate. So it's like more of that he was compensated or paid to testify on behalf of the government or the prosecution and state what they wanted him to say.
So
also, I end up
Go ahead, continue.
Also, I end up me and my counsel, my lawyer, we end up retaining our own personal expert, which is Dr. Yale H. Kaplan, and he's out of Baltimore, Maryland, and he's PhD, has PhD certified, and he did his own individual, research of the situation and did his own, I say diagnosis, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And he determined that it was 7 different drugs present in the victim's system when she died, and also a heavy alcohol level. Also that the victim had a lot of health problems due to an enlarged heart. She had brain problems and also liver problems due to alcohol abuse, going basically to liver failure due to alcohol abuse. So he said he felt that the cause of death.
You breaking up a lot. You breaking up a lot right now, bro. Can you hear me? You were breaking up a lot right there. So we didn't hear kind of the second half of what you said. If you want to pick back up at the 7 different drugs that were found in the system.
Yes, I was saying that I had hired my own independent doctor, which is Yale A. Kaplan out of Baltimore, Maryland, and he did his own determination and came up with a diagnosis that he determined and that he searched, researched and found that it was 7 different drugs present in the victim's system when she died, and also a heavy alcohol level, and also the victim had brain problems, liver problems, liver problems, and enlarged heart. And he said he felt that all this was the cause of death.
Yes, and that was Dr. Kaplan's testimony. And Dr. Kaplan, if I recall correctly, has over 40 years experience. I want to say he served in the medical director's office in Baltimore, Maryland, where historically they've had some of the most heroin and fentanyl overdoses than any other community here in the country. So I think it's important to know that context and kind of know his background when we talk about, his perspective, basically stating that if an individual is heavily engaging in these type of drugs, it's inconclusive to say that one drug was specifically the cause of death. And I think that was Dr. Kaplan's testimony. There was also, not to get too far into the case, but there was also some concern around the different, there was some confusion around the packaging of the actual drugs. Could you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Well, I actually still have present with me all the documents and all the police reports and interview reports that were done with the other suspects in the case. And the original suspect who that it was alleged that I distributed fentanyl to, he stated on 2 different reports that when I gave him the drugs that they were packaged in a paper, like you could say like a lottery ticket. And the guy that he gave the drugs to said on numerous reports, also in my trial, in both trials, I ended up having 2 trials, And he said in both of the trials that when he received drugs from the other individual, they were packaged in a clear sandwich baggie. So these are definitely two different, totally different packaging, and it's a lot of different people involved with handling this same drugs. So which definitely would give plenty of room for someone to either tamper with the drugs or either swap out the drugs and give something else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Also, in the exchange of the drugs, this was over a period of hours, right? So it wasn't like it was immediately from one person to the next. I know it came up in trial about a situation with one of the parties involved at the gas station, where essentially they were in the bathroom for a period of time. So I think all of that speaks to the concern that there's just not enough evidence to say that allegedly the exact drugs that allegedly came from you were the exact drugs that ended up in Miss Mamagona's possession.
Yes, not at all. And also the individual that I was alleged to be selling to, he also stated in my trial, which is on trial transcripts, black and white, that I have present with me, that he has numerous different people that he calls for drugs on a daily basis. He doesn't have no specific one person that he buys drugs from. He'll buy drugs from anybody who has it who's present at the time. Anybody to his best convenience is what he'll do.
Yeah, that's typically what you see with people who have that condition. I think what you're pointing to is important to add another layer of context that too often in our community, when an individual per se has a drug problem, it's typically looked at as a criminal offense. But in this situation, these individuals, from my view, it appears that they were more treated as someone who had a medical condition. And I think that that's what essentially what this is. And unfortunately, not everybody, gets that same, connotation. I wanted to, before we close, because I want to be respectful of your time, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak to, outside of this specific case, there were some other injustices that happened with you throughout the investigation into, some of the alleged drug sales and things like that. Do you feel comfortable with speaking to that or shedding any light on that piece?
Can you elaborate a little more?
Yeah, we're specifically referring to the situation with the arrest warrant that was, I think, not legally obtained. That kind of ties into this case.
They had when I originally got incarcerated July 8th, the Grand Rapids Police Department had this search warrant of a home that they said it was believed that I was staying at, and they raided the home and they confiscated some money, and they did end up finding some drugs, but when I ended up being federally indicted, I actually took those charges. You can say it's called a suppression motion, which is to determine did they have probable cause to come into the home, and it was determined by a federal judge, by the chief federal judge, that the search was an illegal search and seizure, and that they did not even have probable cause to even come into the home, so they illegally raided the home.
All right. No, I think that's important too, just to shed light on all the other pieces to this. But before we go, we only have about a minute and 20 seconds left. I want to close with you just saying, what are your feelings? How has this affected your life? And how would you like for this situation to be resolved? What would be justice for you?
My result that I want is just a fair outcome and a fair sentence. Right now, I'm due to get sentenced next month, April 26th, and I'm due to receive a life sentence in prison for something that I'm truly not responsible for, because I never sold any drugs to the victim that died, nor to the person that gave the drugs to the victim that died. Also, there's so much other evidence that's involved in the case that shows and proves my innocence, and I never should have been federally indicted and being charged with death from the beginning. So that's my main situation, and then my main outcome that I want is a fair outcome, a fair sentence, and justice to be served on my behalf. Like I said, I've been right now incarcerated going on 3 years, which is more time than anybody else who's involved in the case.
All right. So I think, thank you for your time, Javontae. I know we were only able to cover so much, but we'll definitely connect with you soon. And thanks for sharing your story.